All right, we'll call the meeting back to from recess to, is that my water? That's my water, I guess. Get my glasses on so I don't get in trouble. Well, good evening, Miss Henderson. Am I saying? Harrison. I get Henderson and Harrison mixed up every time, so forgive me. That's the reason I asked. So I want to welcome you here and thank you for being here and interested in the director's position. The interview process is each board member gets 2 questions. We expect it to take 60 to 90 minutes. We ask you to answer the questions as thoroughly and concisely as possible. And I'll start things off with just an intro question. If you would, give us a brief description of your background and why you're interested in our director of schools position.
Before I begin, I would just like to address the elephant in the room, and that is I'm 2 weeks past knee replacement, so I'm temporarily a little vulnerable. Nobody likes to go into a job interview feeling vulnerable. And for the first time in my life, I had to have my mother to come to a job interview with me. So we've gone back a few decades. In addition to that, she even had to help me tie my shoes. But I am here because I believe in Sumner County. I grew up in Sumner County. I was educated in Sumner County schools. I have worked in Sumner County schools my entire career, despite having several opportunities to go elsewhere. Just never felt the need to make that shift. I have been, if you look at my resume, my educational background, you'll notice that I always tell people, I've been to just about every school within a 45-minute drive of my house. Because I was one of those kiddos in high school. First of all, I tried to drop out of high school. If it had not been for a wonderful assistant principal who convinced me to stay and found a way for me to do that. Graduated Christmas, which was quite uncommon at the time. I very well may have dropped out. By the time graduation rolled around in May, I was married. And quickly after that, had children. I've also said that God knows He knew to give me my children early in life, because once I became a teacher, I don't think I would have been able to do that. So had my children, stayed at home with them until the youngest started kindergarten. At that time, I went back to college. And everybody says, well, how did you decide on education? Well, first of all, I didn't declare my major at Ball State until they made me do so. Because I kept feeling that I was being called to go into education, and I kept telling myself, no, I can't do that. No way can I do that. Till finally, I gave in and declared education as my major. Finished at Ball State, went on to Cumberland, where I got a transfer scholarship. And the very first class we had there, in the very first education class we had, we were asked the question about why we chose education. And the professor had us working in small groups, and we each shared that information with members of our group. And like any good instructor, he was up monitoring the classroom, seeing what students were saying. And at the time, I shared with my group that I felt that I had been called to go into education. But then whenever it came time for the big whole group discussion, he called on me to ask me to share why I had. Well, I gave one of the other reasons. He said, no, now really, just tell the class. And so I shared with the class that I had decided to go into education because I felt a calling to do so. He informed me at that time that the more successful educators have that calling as well. So it has been wonderful for me. I taught 12 years at Beach High School, hired by Ms. Mary Klaus, a very good principal. And in 2000, lost my daughter, and at that time the opportunity came up to pursue administration, and I felt like my daughter was killed in a drunk driving accident. I knew the man, I started to say gentleman, but that doesn't qualify. I knew the man who hit her head on. We went to high school together. And I knew at that time, had an idea, as kids do, about the path that he was headed down. After what happened to my daughter, I decided that I wanted to go into administration just so that I could help students make better decisions, so that nobody else would ever be faced, or fewer people would be faced with what we had to deal with. My first admin position was at White House Middle School. We brought the 5th grade over at that time. First time that I had dealt with elementary school students, except for my own. Quickly learned how the ins and outs of scheduling, social emotional development, academics. Loved those little 5th graders. Loved the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders as well. While I was there, I pursued a doctorate. You'll notice, if you notice my education, you'll notice that I tried a couple times. It took me 2 tries to get my doctorate. First one was through TSU. And so Dr. Becker and I had taken some classes together through TSU, and whenever he became principal at Gallatin High School, he asked if I would like to join him there. So I did go to Gallatin for 6 years. While there, I oversaw CTE. The students that were on my caseload were all of the special ed students. So at the time that I was there, that was 252 students. That kept me hopping, because as you all know, every student is required to have at least 1 meeting per year. A lot of times for more needy students, there would be multiple meetings per year, in addition to helping my CTE students and helping the special ed teachers. But I love the time that I got to spend with those special ed students. Opened my eyes to a lot of things that until you've been there, you just don't get it. From there, I was asked to come over and be part-time job, split job, principal at E.B. Wilson, virtual and high school instructional coordinator. I did that at the end of 1 year. Dr. Brown at the time asked which position I would like. Well, first of all, she asked me if I would continue in both positions. I said, Dr. Brown, I just don't think I can do it. I'm getting too old. I can't work 80+ hours a week on a regular basis. And so told her that I would prefer to do the instructional coordinator position. So I did that, working with all the high schools in the district. We have about 8,500 students, between 8,500 and 9,000 students, high school students at that time, to support them in, my big focus was on equity, to ensure that they had access to AP classes, dual enrollment, dual credit classes. We also introduced RTI during my time there. We went through the Common Core trend, navigated through all of those pieces as well. We also navigated the trend from where principals were historically coaches and great managers of people, to encouraging them and teaching them how to be strong instructional leaders. And so, and now we see more and more of that because the principal job is so important for student achievement. Went to Rucker Stewart, loved my time at Rucker Stewart. It was a very challenging school. No day was the same. Every single day was different, which I liked. Most diverse middle school in the district. I loved being able to look out in the cafeteria at lunchtime and see all the different babies and all the different things that they were working on and talking about. It was a great experience. And then I went to be the virtual instructor for the district as a follow-up to COVID, providing online instruction to first semester we had about 150 students. Second semester we had about 70 students. Lots of early graduates through that program. And that brought me to Westmoreland High School, where I'm currently the assistant principal, where I do my primary roles are 504s, of course observations. Everybody gets to do observations. And all the little extra things. Mr. Duffer and Mr. Creasy have been working together for a very long time, so they have their own little dance. And so I'm there to support them and to take on anything extra, anything they don't want to do. I say, send it my way. I can do it for you.
All right. Thank you. Before we get into the questions, Mr. Johnson, is there any way to turn the air conditioner down to fast freeze and get it off a stun? My hands are absolute icebergs. So while he's doing that, thank you, Ms. Harrison. First question is going to come from Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Chair Brewer. Welcome, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to just start off by apologizing to you for any angst that I caused, or if I offended you in any way at the March 21st meeting, based on the information that we had received from the TSBA. And I'm grateful that they were able to check with the vendor, got your login time, and that you are here to interview today.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here as well.
So the first question, how can you bring together a diverse, talented group of individuals to form an effective team?
So I feel like I did that at Rucker Stewart. We had quite a diverse group there. Granted, it will be different at the higher level. The important thing is to lay out the exact expectations, make sure that as a leader, everyone understands my vision. That doesn't mean that I create that vision on my own, because we definitely take feedback from all constituents as to their vision, what that should be. And then make sure that everybody is on the same page, rowing in the same direction. That the expectations are clear. The expectations are for everyone, no matter who you are. I hold myself to those same expectations. I would hold everyone to those same expectations. You also have to figure in a little bit of time for teams to get to know one another. That can be accomplished through informal gatherings. Whenever I was at Rucker, we created what we called the Fun Company. So once a month, we had some sort of activity for the faculty to do outside of school hours. That job, Rucker is not an easy school. It took very strong teachers. The teachers would get tired. They needed to know that they could go to each other, that they could come to me with any concerns that they have. So once a month we had little parties, if you will, some totally optional, generally lasted about 30 minutes. And then about once every other month we would do get-togethers that would allow us to be able to meet each other's families, because you really get to know people by their families, how they interact with their families. And so those are the things that are important, is to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You have to have some fun. The work's going to be hard. You have to acknowledge that the work is hard. You have to celebrate those little victories any and every chance you get. You have to have clear and direct communication when people do not live up to the expectations or work up to the expectations. and work with those folks individually to see exactly what's going on. Do they need extra support? Did they not understand? Wide variety of different things can happen there in order to have everyone working together.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster.
Oh, get my stuff in order here. First of all, thank you very much for being here, Dr. Harrison. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Ms. Lancaster.
What are your ideas towards ensuring that teachers are not only supported but appreciated from the highest level of leadership? That's part one. I'm gonna throw you a two-parter here. Second part, how might you ensure that you are receiving truthful and honest feedback from those on the front lines every day? So first part again, what are your ideas towards ensuring that teachers are not only supported but appreciated from the highest levels of leadership? And second part, how might you ensure you are receiving truthful feedback from those that are on the front lines every day?
To me, it's very important to get to know the teachers, even at the top level, to be able to go into a building and know several of those teachers by name straight off and get to learn those teachers, their names. There's a lot to be said in showing someone appreciation just by calling them by their name and knowing what they do. And as I said earlier, you have to celebrate the little wins, those little daily wins, as well as celebrating those great big victories, if you will. I know teachers today, they do kind of feel underappreciated. I think that it's important as far as getting genuine feedback, because there are times, and I'm sure that people have done that to me, is that they say what they think they want you to hear. And so I know everybody gets tired of surveys, but that's a really good way to gather information. I have even, in the time that I've been in education, I have seen times when teachers wouldn't even fill out surveys because they felt like they were gathering information on the other end about who they were in order to track them. One thing that I would like to say is that I think it's important to get those variety of views. I don't want somebody who's going to agree with me all the time, because hello, I'm not always right, even though I want to be. So it's really important for us to get that information. Sometimes that can come, like I said, through surveys, through third parties, a variety of different ways. And just making sure that, like I said, you show appreciation to them in big and small ways. I love the way that we recognize our Teachers of the Year. There are still a lot of great teachers who don't go and recognize. This morning, when Mother came to my house, she got there a little bit early, and she's been in communication with somebody. She does senior citizens in Westmoreland. So I've been trying to help her set up a time with one of our business teachers so his kids can go over and help the senior citizens with technology issues, with their phones, get their voicemail set up and all that. So, and we were just talking about what a great teacher this was. I'm not sure this particular teacher would ever win a Teacher of the Year. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But he's just a fabulous person. And I think we just share that with as often and with as many people as we possibly can, just individuals like that, because it's not an easy job these days to be a teacher.
All right. Mr. Gregory, turn your light on, please.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
What have you done to help the public understand the needs of your school system?
Let me just say, in my different roles that I've had, I have worked to make sure that people do understand the needs. When I was at Gallatin High School, there was a group of business people who wanted to form a partnership with us just to get students out into factories, if you will, because they can't find qualified employees. I actually got some pushback from the central office about doing that, and we had to establish some ground rules, if you will, about what that relationship would look like, and that sort of thing. So I reached out there to let people know what was needed. While I was at Rucker, we had a wonderful PTO who was there to share, primarily went that route with them. Now that I'm at Westmoreland, I know lots of people in that community. Like I said, that's where I grew up. And so if we see that something is needed, we can go directly to whomever we think can supply that, and always make sure that that the needs are being met as best we can.
Right. Ms. Andrews?
Yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Think of a problem brought to you recently. What was the problem and how did you handle it?
A problem that was brought to me recently. One of the, because I'm an assistant principal at this point, so my role at this point is working with students and teachers, rather than with the principal role being primarily teachers and public. So situation that came up was that we had a student that's on my caseload who just didn't want to work. The teachers would share that he just doesn't want to work. And so we met with him on a regular basis. I developed a behavior plan for him, regular check-ins with the teacher, spoke with the student about, you know, what's going on, because I see that in your previous schools, you had A's and B's in AP courses and pre-AP courses. So what is it about being here that now you don't want to work? And so he shared with me some of the things that were going on, a lot of the things outside of the school, a lot of stuff going on at home. He also, we talked about what classes he wanted to take. And so when he came, he arrived to us a little bit later, so he didn't get to choose maybe some of the classes that he might have liked to have been in. And so, but we were by talking with him and trying to dig to the bottom of it, able to discover which class that he wanted to be in. He just so happened to be in the class of the teacher that I was just telling you about. And 2 days after being in that class, the teacher comes to the door and says, come here, you gotta see this. And the student was instructing the other group of students that he was with. So again, just feeling like you have as much information as you can possibly gather, and then trying to problem solve to make sure that that happens. I think I'm pretty pragmatic when it comes to problem solving. I don't believe in just throwing money at an issue. You try to solve it with what you already have. And then if you can't solve it, then that's where you have to call in reinforcements.
Mr. Daniels?
Thank you, Dr. Harrison, for being here this afternoon. My question is, can you tell us about the most important decision you've made in your last or current position, and how did you involve the people who would have been affected by that decision?
Well, maybe a couple of positions ago. So as I said earlier, when I was instructional coordinator, The vision was for RTI, response to intervention. There's still some debate about how effective that is by the time a student gets to high school. The vision, the district vision at that time would be that schools would offer RTI. I can tell you from personal experience, it was needed because, you know, I've had multiple conversations with high school students about you need to be able to read, because when you have a baby, you want to be able to hold a book and you want to be able to read that book to your student. There was some pushback as far as RTI was concerned. I met with the principals individually and in groups, and we basically had some guardrails, but then we let the principals work so that that program would be what they needed it to be for their individual buildings. Much the same way as, you know, a lot of the policies that you all pass. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Hawkins?
Thank you.
Describe a significant change you initiated in your district or school, and tell us what evidence you have to show it was a positive change. How did you build support for that change, even in the face of opposition?
So one of the things that I did shortly after coming to the district office was that we saw from the data that there was a discrepancy between high school students' GPAs and their ACT scores. Some students, it was a lot, some students not so much. But when colleges look at GPAs, they want it to be an indication of what the student's capable of doing. ACT is generally thought more reliable than that. I'm not going to get into that at this point. And so we did get some pushback. You know, why does that matter? What we found was that we had some teachers who would give completion grades. Completion grades elevate a student's grade. It's not necessarily an indication of what the student knows and is able to do. And so we really pushed for, we had a guest speaker to come in, organized a day of learning for all of the high school teachers and administrators. I actually pulled all of the ACT data for the students from that year that had graduated that year and compared it to the students' GPAs for that year. It was quite, the principals, the teachers, it was quite shocking in some places to see the disparity. A lot of times it was, the GPA was too high for what the student was getting, but then at the same time, on the flip side of that, you get those kids that are not really into school who do a phenomenal job on the ACT. And so by looking at those pieces of data, we were able to determine and reach a better consensus about primarily completion grades and what a grade actually means and how it should reflect what a student knows and is able to do.
All righty.
Welcome.
Mr. Lancaster?
As you know, the nationwide teacher shortage is a hugely concerning problem. How have you addressed teacher satisfaction and attempted to maximize teacher retention in your current role?
Okay, so that's not really a fair question because in my current role, the teachers start there and the teachers retire from there. So retention is not really an issue at Westmoreland High School. There are a number of retirements coming up. There are actually kind of teachers who are kind of waiting on pins and needles to say, come on over. One thing goes back to the appreciation. Teachers have to know that they are appreciated. I think the district is doing pretty good about getting out and meeting teachers, going to job fairs. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but during COVID, I don't think I got a slap on the back of the hand or anything for it. Maybe nobody knew. During COVID, on Wednesdays, when the teachers were in the building by themselves, we did whatever we could to make them feel more comfortable. So sometimes that meant I have gone to Starbucks and bought drinks for the entire staff. They asked if they could bring their pets. No kids in the building. And so after fighting it for a little bit, I said, we'll take care of it. And so they actually did bring their pets. They had to be responsible for, any mess that the pets made. But just that showing that I respected them as a human being, because not only did the kids suffer during COVID, it was hard on the teachers too. And just that little bit of doing what I could didn't cost me anything, no extra resources, no extra time. That was one thing that I could do to show them that they were appreciated. And what was one of the hardest things about leaving Rucker is that I felt like I had put together a phenomenal team that has just disintegrated at this point. They've all gone in different directions. So, I felt like we worked hard to bring that team together, and then, but they're no longer together.
All right. Next question comes from Mr. King, who couldn't be here today, so I'll read it for him. Our district is fiscally dependent upon the county commission. How would you propose gaining their support of the school budget?
First of all, I tend to believe, and maybe I am totally naive, I've been told that before too, that if people see a need for something, if the county commission sees a need for something, a true need, not a want, but a need, I feel like they will do their best to make it happen. Now, the thing is being able to show that it's a want and not a need. And that requires a lot of communication. As I'm sure you all are aware that I'm concerned about with where the county commission is now is kind of back where we were when Dr. Phillips first came in, is that, we had a hard time getting anything passed. And now with the change in the political nature of the county commission at this point, it's not going to be easy. But I feel like working with each of the commissioners, helping them to see within their own individual districts what is needed, sharing that with them. I'm not a big, and I know some people do social media, lots and lots of posts on social media. I'm not a big social media person. I'm more of a social media creeper. That's what my nieces and nephews say. But sometimes you have to get social media involved, and so that the commissioners will see from their constituency that there is a need, and make that happen.
Ms. Hayes?
Our district, no, I'm gonna read the wrong one. There's all blurring together now after hours. Explain how you would develop a school system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them.
Who and how? With any large decision, you want to get as much information as you possibly can. So that involves parents, that involves teachers, that involves administrators, community members, business owners. Each of those groups need to have some input. I think if you, in the packet that I gave you, if you turn to the back, there's like a 90-day plan in there that talks about meeting with each of those groups individually to determine what they see as the need. Again, not the want, maybe determining the difference between the need and the want. Then working with those people to understand what the fiscal part would be, the fiscal implications. It's important also to understand that in the 29 years that I have been in the district and moved within different communities within the district, there aren't a lot of, I have concerns about the equity of resources in different schools across the district. I'm not talking about equal. Everybody wants it to be equal. I'm talking about equitable, where everybody gets what they need. And I feel like that you have to make that very, very clear on the get-go, that is the purpose, is to provide what is needed for every individual student. Goes back to the way that TEAS is going to be funded. You know, it's going to be funded on a student-by-student basis based on their need. And so involve all of those people to see what their perception of the needs are. Involve all of those people to see what their perception of the wants are, and develop a budget based on that, with the county commission knowing what money is available.
This one also comes from Mr. King, who couldn't be here, so I'll read it for him. Give us an example of when you've changed your mind and taken a different course of action as a result of listening to others.
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is probably something I don't need to talk about today. I can't, nothing really pops into my head.
The next one's Mr. Lacey. He had to leave. So can you provide an example of what you have done to build/maintain high morale among staff?
We kind of touched on that a little bit, doing little special things involving parents and the PTO. The PTO at Rutgers sent several of our teachers to Ron Clark Academy, which is a professional learning opportunity that teachers come back just totally changed. It's an amazing opportunity for teachers. They also provided gift cards, extra time. Teachers appreciate time as much as anything, and so anytime I would go in and sit with a class if a teacher needed to go do something, or sometimes just pop in and say, hey, I got 10 minutes. Are you good? You want to take a 10-minute break? And so any of those things, to me, it's not necessarily the monetary things, even though, don't get me wrong, they definitely appreciate the monetary. But there are other ways to show that appreciation, just through time, recognition, gifts of service.
Okay. And this question is from Mr. Graham, who also had to leave. What steps would you take to ensure academic success?
So one of the things that that we talked about just as I was finishing up my tenure here was visible learning. So that was some years ago that we first started talking about visible learning. And by visible learning, it's about providing assessment and feedback to students, all of the little things that you can do and which ones have the biggest impact on student achievement. So even though that had been years ago, when I went to a training at my current school this summer, we had a speaker that came in and talked about that exact same thing. And a teacher spoke to me afterwards and she said, I think that's just the best thing ever. So our work is never done. Even though we think that we have shared information, that we have made professional learning ongoing and collaborative, the work is never done. So we constantly have to make sure that, first of all, if the message is the same, then we need to make sure the message stays the same. Need to make sure that teachers follow up. New teachers get the training that they need to be able to do that. Update based on new research that comes out to make sure that everybody gets what they need.
Mr. Daniels.
Yes. Can you describe your experience in developing, implementing, and/or evaluating an instructional program that has improved the educational achievement of students?
Well, there are a number of things. Like I said, the RTI piece being one of them. We did, the state was, at the time we had to do it, but they didn't give us anything to help us do it. And so it was left up just to each individual school to determine how they were going to go about doing that. And so we worked on basic skills even at the high school level. We worked on addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division for math, and reading for ELA. I told somebody that years ago I came to the realization that I'm a math and science geek. I own it. One of my favorite colleagues whenever I was at Beach was an ELA person, and I finally just had to concede. I said, okay, so math is the universal language, but I have to concede reading is really, really important. So we've tried to make sure that happens across the board. The other piece is the ACT program, improving ACT scores. I had done that whenever I was at the district level. We did that again at Westmoreland. At Westmoreland, we weren't going to have enough computers for everybody to do a practice test at one time. So we actually created, I created a little bit of a different program for our freshmen who hadn't taken the test yet, which really focused on the importance of that and some tips on how to approach the test and how to approach any multiple choice test. The students felt like it was important, and there were older kids who came and said, I want to see what they did. I heard about that. I want to see what they did. So the more practice we can get with ACT, in the packet that I gave you, kind of took my resume and added some data pieces in there. So that you could see what I was talking about in some of those pieces. We saw steady growth in ACT while I was at the district. Still continue to see some growth with that. Also with AP, we started really pushing AP and was able to grow that program across the district. Of course, Hendersonville being a shining star in that light. I think they still are. More AP scholars than the rest of our schools. But it was important to me, again, the the equity of that. One of the last, maybe the last year that I was in that position, some of our rural schools, White House and Westmoreland, they don't necessarily have the students to be able to do an AP class. Even if it's 6 or 7 students, they just can't get that into their schedule. And so we worked on a virtual version of that. I'll have to admit, I don't know that it was extremely successful. There were some tweaks that could be made to help it be more successful. But just looking for those extra resources that are out there, like I said, being pragmatic, trying to problem solve without necessarily just throwing money at a problem.
Mr. Wise.
Dr. Harrison, would you consider yourself more of a fixer or a sustainer? And you can expound on that a bit if you like.
I kind of see myself in either role, depending on what is needed. Of course, if you see something that's going well, it doesn't require change. I don't believe in change for change's sake, which a lot of people do. Feel like that if they go into a new role that they have to change to show that, I don't know what it's supposed to show, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's very important. But if something is broken, then definitely fix it. And sometimes in the packet that I gave you, just some of the data that I pulled out was kind of I would call the low-hanging fruit, where the pieces are very obvious. I did that for a couple of reasons. First, I wanted you to know that I do look at data. I know how to interpret data. But I didn't have a whole lot of time since, in order to prepare the way that I would like, and then, with being on medical leave. So it all depends on what is needed. And I feel like I'm adaptable in that way. I'm not, I can change depending on what is needed, depending on the data that's in front of me, looking through and seeing what is needed, and can be a pit bull or a teddy bear, depending on what the qualifications are for the specific task.
All right, next question. Mr. Lacey had to go, but before he left, he asked me to strike that question. He didn't want me to ask it. So we'll move on to Miss Andrews, number 16.
What does your strategic planning process look like to ensure decisions are delivered in a timely manner? Please specify what tools and resources you use, as well as who you involve in the process.
Like I said before, all stakeholders should be included in the strategic plan. It does take a while to get that information in. It takes even longer to analyze that information, so it does have to occur pretty early in the planning process. In looking at those, you want to address, like I said, I referred to before, kind of the low-hanging fruit. But you also want to dive into the data enough to find the little nuanced things that the small things that you can leverage for big impact. And the strategic planning process allows you to do that. It also allows you to be able to show appreciation for your teachers and other employees by having them to assist with that process. And it's always good for them to understand that process and the data that goes into it, help them to understand the data themselves. It takes a while. I know you said in a timely fashion, but strategic planning takes a while. we should already be well into that process.
All right, Mr. Gregory. Turn your light on, sir. Thank you.
How would you work with the board to be effective, make good decisions, and be respected as a board by the community?
First of all, I think it's important. I do understand that as a director of schools that I am the employee of the board and not the other way around. The director of schools is not the end all be all. That's your job. It's important that we work together as a team. You know, there can be division. It's important that everybody can see each other's perspective. That can be accomplished, as I said, just with teachers. That can be accomplished through several different ways, by some casual and some formal events, so that we all can develop together what your vision is as well. My job is to work between you all and the schools to ensure that that vision sees fruition, to try to anticipate any obstacles, to try to cultivate successes in making sure that that vision comes to fruition. Community is important. Like I said, I'm not much for social media, but I can do it if I need to. And I know that some of you are on social media, and I think that a lot of you use it very, very well in order to get your point across. And you just, as a director of schools, you just have to be careful about how you use that media, as with any media. To make sure that there is transparency, truthfulness, and so that communicating with the community. It's important to keep an open door policy. That is very hard to do, even when with some of the jobs that I've had. The research shows that every time you get interrupted from a task, it takes you 7 minutes to get back into the flow of doing that task. And so if you have multiple interruptions, that can be difficult. So I think it would be important to set aside various parts of the day for different sorts of interactions and just plan on having that. Certain times that are set aside to be as much as possible uninterrupted times, times that there's an open door policy so that people from the community, people from the board, administrators, teachers, students, parents, whomever could feel that they would have someone to listen, because I found listening can solve a lot of woes.
All right. Next one is from Mr. Graham, who had to leave also. What do you consider to be the most significant outcome of planning that you've been involved with in a school or district?
Well, I would have to say I got to be involved in a lot of the choice schools that we have here in the district. So our high schools of choice, the middle technical college, the middle college, of course E.B. Wilson. I was there after it became virtual. The Union University experience, Welsh, all of those have helped to create relationships with those post-secondary organizations, has helped our students have opportunities that they would not have had had it not been for those programs. They are just going right along down the track, providing students and businesses, industry with qualified personnel. There is and of course I said it's a never-ending job, because I was just approached by somebody from the Nissan plant who is interested in a relationship with Sumner County Schools. So never-ending. Again, just making sure that the students get what they need so that our community can thrive, the businesses have the employees that they need.
Mr. Wise.
Dr. Harrison, can you provide an example in your current position that demonstrates your ability to build confidence in the schools?
Well, again, I don't know about in my current position.
You can back up one or two.
Okay, okay. So one of the things I talked about at Rucker, a challenging school. Whenever I was there, we started the awards program that not only recognized the top students, but also the most improved students. You know, our TVOS scores are based on improvement. So it felt disingenuous not to do that at the local level as well. And so sharing that with the parents brought in a lot of support for the school. I had numerous calls from parents that said, I got this letter. Is this right? Yes, ma'am. Your child's going to be recognized. So those things that we can do to galvanize the community, we had a great program at Rucker, the Amazing Shake. Brought in each year probably 100-ish community members through the course of the whole thing, just to help judge it. We had about that many students involved, and we saw great success with that. A lot of community support for that, just by getting the word out, letting them know that we're there for their kids. We're going to provide what they need, whether it be academic or social emotional, pre-vocational, transitional, any of those supports.
All right, and our final question.
Mr. Chairman, before Ms. Hawkins asks her final question, because I do like to end on that question, I am going to ask that we do go ahead and ask question 15. I know that Mr. Lacey requested for that to be removed. However, we have already asked that question to 2 previous candidates, and I think in order for the interviews to be equitable, that if his name wants to be removed from that, I think that could be fine, but I do think that it also needs to be asked.
Question number 15, asked by Tim Brewer. Do you think it's appropriate for school employees to also serve as county commissioners?
I think it depends on the level. Just because I'm a school employee does not mean that I give up my civic rights to be able to run for office. And we have some school teachers who are county commissioners currently. And I think that they do a great job. They're supportive of our schools. Are they going to railroad a decision through because of their job as a teacher? The ones that I know would not do that. I think when we start to get into some problems, and I was a little bit taken aback when this happened in our district, because I did feel like it was a conflict of interest to have somebody who is high level in the school system who is also making decisions for the district, financial decisions for the district.
Okay, now, for the final question, Ms. Hawkins.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Is there something you would like to tell us that is not on your resume?
Well, I was hoping you would ask me what my career high was, and okay. So I feel like I've kind of gone full circle because, as you can see on my resume, my education, I was all but dissertation for 10 years between my TSU experience and my Lipscomb experience. Probably would not have done it had it not been a cohort experience with Lipscomb. 2 years ago, I received an email from a former student through LinkedIn, and he sent me a link and he said, I think you want to look at this. So this student came to me the year that I lost my daughter. I had written a course proposal for forensic science course, and we already had students signed up to take it, and then at the last minute we didn't get approval for it. So I had holes in my schedule that the administration needed to fix, and so and I think that they anticipated that maybe that would not be my finest year teaching, and so I became the school technology specialist. So I had a block in the fall and a block in the spring in order to do help with technology issues at the school. We wound up wiring the vast majority of Beach High School. This was back when we were just trying to get wireless into the schools. Because I was a school technology specialist, I had a student who asked to be my teaching assistant. This was a student who was on my academic decathlon team. So not a lot of people know much about academic decathlon in Tennessee. It's relatively small here. But it, of course, is 10 events, and it groups students by GPA. So you have lower GPA students competing together, medium GPA students competing together, high GPA students competing together. The student asked if he could be on my academic decathlon team. At that point, I had not had him in class yet. I did know that his GPA was like a 1.25, which put him in the lowest category for competition for academic decathlon. We went to competition and he placed in the state. He then took one of my classes and I found out how very brilliant that he was. He came to me while he was my teaching assistant, which really he helped with the technology. And he was really down one day, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he showed me an essay that he had written, and it was covered in red ink. And I said, "Oh, that's okay. You can get through that. I'll help you." And then he turned it over to the bottom of the back page, and it said in red ink, "Why bother?" Okay, so this student had gotten that from one of his teachers. So we worked together. He was my TA for 2 years, and we worked together on academic decathlon, worked together on chemistry, worked together on physics, worked together on computers. He taught me a little bit about some different programming. I wanted to show him that I was interested in what he was interested in. The link that he sent me was for the dedication for his dissertation. He had gotten his dissertation in artificial intelligence, And he had written something to the effect of that I had ignited a fire in him for knowledge that had yet to be extinguished. I'm done. That's my career high. I hope every teacher gets to have that experience, because it really, really means a lot. Also have another student that referred to me just recently. I opened up a thank you letter from a wedding gift that I had sent, and she called me once again an angel in a tie-dyed lab coat. So just a couple of the many students that I appreciate and loved working with. Anything else?
All right. We thank you so much for being here, Dr. Harrison, and I'll get your name right from now on, I promise.
That's okay.
And for especially making the effort to come out, being on medical leave, we appreciate that very much. And we
Thank
thank
you.
Mom for taking care of you and helping you get out here.
Help me tie my shoes.
So we are adjourned for today. We will be back tomorrow at noon. Gotta get my glasses on. Thank you. You too. Yeah, our first interview is at noon tomorrow. So we will see you then. We're adjourned.